Well, hey, there was an article that was released on July 7th, and when everything came out, I wanted to cover it, and then things got busy. We're about to launch for the new semester here at our youth ministry, and now I'm starting to get to it. So it's at the end of the month. It's been out a couple of weeks. I actually haven't heard many people talking about it outside of the day that it happened, so it might be good just to revisit this. It's an article that I wanted to make sure that we checked out. Um, it's from the New York Times, and it was a ruling that the IRS basically filed a legal position that said that churches might endorse or oppose political candidates as a part of customary communications in services without risking their 501c3 tax exemption. Which this is a relaxing enforcement of what is called the Johnson Amendment, which basically was one of the markers that prevented political speech that happens within the context of a church service. This is now getting relaxed. It doesn't necessarily repeal it, but it reinterprets it, and it might just go beyond this initial filing, this initial suit that came out, and the plaintiffs that brought it. I think it was two Texas churches that brought this, but let's go ahead and just kind of dive in to the article here. It says that the IRS said on Monday that churches and other houses of worship can endorse political candidates to their congregations, carving out an exemption in a decades-old ban on political activity by tax-exempt nonprofits. It was intended to settle a lawsuit filed by two Texas churches and Association of Christian Broadcasters. So basically, they said, hey, we should be able to do this based on our First Amendment rights. And it really is now shifting this thing that tax exempt groups cannot be used as tools of any of the campaign. So this kind of reinforces some of the feelings that people have about political speech in churches. And it definitely can seem that way on the surface. It says this: for years, the IRS has seemed deeply leery of punishing religious leaders for political statements made during worship, but experts said this was the first time that the agency has formally said that the statements were not just tolerated but explicitly legal. So this was not necessarily enforced a ton, but it's now even stronger that it's legal. It basically tells churches that of all denominations and sects that you're free to support candidates from the pulpit. A law professor from the University of Notre Dame who has studied regulation of political activity by churches. It also says to all candidates and parties, hey, time to recruit some churches. I think this is actually one of the repercussions that is most going to be tangible moving forward, which is this political recruitment of not just evangelical voting blocks, but now actual churches and their congregations. Because if you can get the pastor to give some sort of formal endorsement as a church, that's naturally going to shift where people think, what they believe, because as church leaders, a lot of people take what we have to say and they use that to inform some of their decisions. And it's not going to be limited to just their membership. Even Las Vegas doesn't stay in Las Vegas these days. Everybody has a web page. This is communications, talking about communications and all of this stuff. And then it goes into the very end of the article and all of this stuff. But I wanted to kind of get into some of that. I wanted to read just so that you have some familiarity with it and talk about some of the positives, some of the negatives, some of the things that are good, some of the things that maybe are a little bit risky moving forward, and kind of what it means for the church. Let's get into the positives first. This is really allowing for religious leaders to fully embrace the First Amendment right of freedom of speech, right? Religious leaders now gain the ability to address candidate qualifications from a moral and faith perspective without fear of penalties, giving congregations an uncensored kind of spiritual leadership. It really does expand the influence that pastors have, especially those who are in the pulpit on a regular basis. This is going to please a lot of lead pastors, a lot of people who take a majority of the speaking engagements. And it also is going to give equitable access, because now it's going to restore religious liberty and align this new interpretation with prior executive orders, especially in the current Trump administration that we're seeing. So a lot of people are saying, hey, this is starting to get really uniform now between executive orders and now this decision that's being made. And for churches that are focused on civic engagement, for churches that are really already politically involved, now there's a direct alignment between scripture and voting decisions and the ways that churches now can engage in that process. Let's get into some of the negatives here. I think that you now see a loophole possibly for campaign finances. Churches are exempt from filing out public financial reporting. Now, this is a little bit of a bad faith kind of negative for some people, because a lot of churches, even though there's no requirement to, they still have public findings of all of their endorsements, all of where their money is going, all of this stuff. And so a lot of churches have this readily available and accessible, even though it's not a requirement. However, for some of the churches that maybe take the next step in this thing, and they actually make endorsements of political candidates or parties or anything like that, they can do this with some minimal transparency. They can essentially start functioning like PACs now, and they can be these untaxed conduits. So it can be a little bit concerning there. There's also this thing of trust and unity. There's a poll that was done by the Washington Post and AP News that said 76% of church goers, people who are in the churches, oppose overt Christian endorsements politically. So what this could do is fracture the congregation to where some people are really excited about it and really gung-ho for it. And then some people, it could be a reason that people leave certain church contexts. And then you have some really uneven ambiguity that's here with how it's implemented. The IRS says that good faith endorsements during services are fine, but it actually doesn't really define any of the boundaries that are there. And so there's not a whole lot of definition of what it looks like right now, which people could take advantage of and could definitely be a little bit risky. And then there are also equity concerns, because there are a lot of nonprofits that I'm sure would love to have this exemption and to be able to do this, except they are not able to. Secular nonprofits still remain restricted. And basically it sets up a two-tier system between religious organizations and secular nonprofits, where they get to do this and the other nonprofits don't. I think what it means for the church is that we just are going to have to be very, very careful with how we use this power. Is it a privilege? Absolutely. Is it something that is fair? Maybe not the most fair among all of the nonprofits, but there's a case to be made that religious nonprofits have been treated kind of poorly and not really given the benefit of the doubt in a lot of instances. And so, it really just is we've got to wait and see how churches are going to use this, especially as we get into midterms and new election cycles. I think there hasn't been prominent ones enough to really see how this is going to play out. And to be honest, even with this restriction, it really didn't stop pastors who felt like they needed to speak politically. It obviously, the Johnson Amendment wasn't all that enforced already. And so will it change a ton? I don't know. It really kind of looks like it's opening up the floodgates a little bit more and definitely providing some legal precedent. But is it really going to change all that much? I don't know. I would say probably not, but it will start to blur the lines even more between church and politics, faith and politics, and just what that looks like, because now churches can continue to develop a political background and influence as they continue to endorse candidates, and that could distract from mission that can distract from some of the things that the church was really established to do. Although there have been a lot of churches that do a very good job of balancing these things. I think the biggest thing that we're going to see the most of, and we've already seen it in the last 2 election cycles that I've personally been pastoring through, and that is the pastoral staff, specifically those who are taking a bulk of the Sunday preaching, are probably going to face even more pressure from donors or networks or people who want to see the church be even more active in the political kind of square. Now that this filing is there, you might see people use it to coerce or to, have an expectation of their pastor to do something or say something. And it can really just muddy the waters a little bit, especially if a pastor doesn't feel like that is where their church is supposed to be. It also can mean that there are a lot of resource disparity between the churches, because if you take a very big what we would call a mega church, and you have that versus another small congregation, that mega church is going to be able to mobilize a lot more quickly and have a bigger platform to be able to kind of platform these ideas, these politicians or these candidates, and these ideas. And are they going to finally drown out the voices of small churches? That's already kind of becoming a problem. And so is that going to happen? I don't know. And then obviously, because the ruling is so murky and it's not really clearly defined, there is going to be more, I think, of filings and lawsuits, just some clarity that's going to be needed, because you're going to have people who take advantage of this. You're going to have people who act like it's not a thing. And so you're really going to have to keep an eye out on how churches are actually implementing this. And this is still, this is just the IRS. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind, is that it's not a congressional bill. It's not something that is law. It's just kind of the precedent that the IRS is using as they are handling filings and doing all this stuff. Congress could still move and formally repeal or amend the Johnson Amendment, or create new legislation around religious nonprofits, specifically churches, and see what exactly needs to be done. So there's a lot here with this article. Go read it for yourself. I'll have the link in the bio so that you can see it. And yeah, man, I'm really interested to see kind of what comes of this, and I want to hear from you. Should churches serve as these political campaign platforms, or do you think that they should continue to do what they've been doing? Has it already been enough? Is it already encroaching on other people's First Amendment rights? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about that. I'd also love to hear this. How do you balance freedom of speech and religious liberty, and how do you do that with congregations that are expecting people to speak, specifically pastors and pastoral leadership, to speak on these things? And I think that this is going to be very, very interesting to keep watch of. Again, because it wasn't that big of a deal beforehand, I don't think that this changes a ton right now, but definitely moving forward, this is something to keep eyes on for sure. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you like and subscribe, comment, let me know what you think about this article and what you think about what you think it could mean for the future of the church and really American politics. I'd love to hear from you. Make sure to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.